This was a very good book. So I'm a little sick, but I gotta talk about this because I read it the other night and it was a solid 5 stars for me. This book was everything I wanted and hoped for and met all of my expectations. It was beautiful. And anybody who's thinking about reading it, just go and sit. Don't worry about it. The only real critique I have is it is very slow paced. I have been warned that it is, and I like slow paced books, so this didn't bother me. But I realized for other people this would be very slow paced. There's a reason for that. It is the first in a 16 book series, so it's got a lot of world building and a lot of character development. The main character, this is basically one giant book about his childhood. So, warning, it's pretty slow paced. I'm talking, there's like when he goes out to town just to walk around, it could take like 3 to 10 pages. So, not that it's boring. That's not what I'm getting at, because it's not. It's not a boring book. Even when he goes to town, just walking alone by himself, it's interesting. So, highly recommend. And I'd also recommend that just, you don't need to know anything about it. It's a good first book for people who want to go into fantasy. Not like a YA to fantasy transition, because this is definitely not YA. This is definitely adult, and everybody recommended to me to start with Lord of the Rings as a first introduction to fantasy. No. That, Lord of the Rings, although I love that book, it took me 2 years to read, which is insane, but it took me 2 years to read because it was high epic fantasy. This could be confused for historical fiction, because though there is mention of some, not mythical creatures, but he does mention he sees dwarves and giants, I believe, in the first couple of pages. You don't really get to see any more than that. The most magical person in this book is the King's Fool. That's about it. There's this magical ability that a couple people have, including the main character. Sort of. But that's as far as it goes. So it's great for, you're scared, you don't really want to go into something crazy, this is the book for you. So I'm gonna get into the review. I don't think I'm gonna do a spoiler review. It's really best to just go into this. But from now I'm gonna really be going through what happens. So the book starts off with Fitz, the main character, who I believe is 6 when the book starts. And he is the king's son's, so the prince's bastard child. And so the prince, who is the king in waiting, ends up just dropping out, and he's like, I don't want to be king, and he just moves away with his wife. So Fitz never actually gets to really meet his father, and he is brought into the kingdom. The family who was taking care of him, they were like, we can't do this. He's yours, technically, so you would take care of him. And that is where his story starts. He becomes, the stable master pretty much takes him under his wing. He becomes pretty much a stable boy. He grows this friendship with dogs and horses, and that works. He's just a typical medieval-y kid for the first, I'd say, 50 pages, or maybe 100. And then the king decides that his apprentice, the king's assassin decides that Fitz will be his new apprentice, as it is fitting to have, if there is a bastard child, it is fitting for them to become the king's assassin. So that starts, and he, on the side, is training to become the king's assassin. And I gotta say, I feel like that's not what this book really is all about. My cat's playing. What are you doing? He's trying to escape now. It's more about Fitz's life. I'm not gonna lie, it's one big book about Fitz and his life. And his life is very normal between the ages of 6 to 10. But after that, it gets pretty bad. Not like Game of Thrones levels bad, but I wouldn't want to be him. He goes through some awful things. He goes through physical, mental, and emotional abuse, and there may be some trigger warnings for suicide, I guess. It's not very subtle, but it's not a huge thing, you know. He's in a bad place mentally. He's about to make a bad decision. So that is there, though. I am warned. So when Fitz, between the ages of 10 and 14, his life is pretty bad, and there are people after him trying to get rid of him, and there are people who are trying to protect him. And that's the last 100 pages is really where I think all the action and politics and everything comes together. And like, a lot of people have said that they saw the ending coming from like a mile away. I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. And it was just such a magical moment. Like, first of all, everything was just happening all at once, and you're just overwhelmed. But then as it makes sense as to what's happening, that's another great thing about this book is there's nothing left, like, open. There's no questions left unanswered. There's no holes in the plot. This book could even be considered, like, if you want to read it as a standalone and you don't want to go on with the other books in the series, which I understand because 16 books, and they're pretty chunky books. You could totally pretend that this is just a standalone. You could just stop there and it wouldn't feel incomplete. But it could also carry on. There are 2 more books of Fitz's life, and then it starts to intermingle with other characters. And apparently it all happens in this kingdom, or this world. I find that hard to believe, but the map is pretty big. They barely made a dent on it. When I was going through the map, I was like, what's all the other stuff about? I don't know why I showed you it.